Hello and welcome to another episode of my YouTube channel, Kaya Kaynak 97. I am here with you again, and for fans of the channel who have been with me from the very start, you will recognise this backdrop. For those of you who are listening on podcast format, I'm back in my bedroom. I'm having to record from here because it is a Saturday, and I live in a house with housemates, and quite fairly, they are allowed in the living room to watch TV, and we live in a house that sort of has like a combined living room kitchen bit. And they're chilling watching TV today because they are off and having a lovely weekend. And I had a bit of time on my hands, so I thought I'd come and do a video with you guys, reacting to everything that's happened this week from an Arsenal perspective. Press conference, building up to Palace, a bit of transfer stuff as well. But I have to do it in here. Here's the compromise for doing it on a weekend. So apologies for the background. I have got rid of the, oh no, you can see it still, the close dryer. I tried to get rid of it. It didn't really go to plan. For those listening in podcast format, not to worry, but not the sexiest of backgrounds this time, but hopefully I've worn a shirt, so hopefully that will make up for the fact that I'm not maybe in the most glamorous of backgrounds, as opposed to where I've been downstairs in my kitchen, which I wouldn't say is much more glamorous, but it's slightly more glamorous. But regardless, let's start this channel, this show, as we always do, by saying thank you very much to everyone who's been involved so far. Thank you very much to everyone who is subscribing these videos. We're up to 3.63 1,000 subscribers. I mean, I think by the end of the month, I'd love to hit 5,000. I'd love to hit 5,000 by August 31st, by the time the transfer window sort of starts to wrap up, and I'll try and ramp up a bit more content for you. Just I suppose, a little bit around the match day stuff. I've been told I'm not allowed to do some of the match day stuff I was hoping for. So I'm going to have to keep it more to these kind of videos where I'm talking to you guys from my home and reacting to what's been going on. I'll try and do a few shorts with you. I'll try and do as much as I can from stadiums and that kind of stuff, and give you a little bit of a flavour of where we are with Arsenal around the world, because I feel like that's kind of a USP of this channel. But in terms of actual in-stadium game content, it's going to be a little bit difficult to bring you as much as I was hoping, but I'm still going to try and bring you plenty. So do stick with me on the channel. Do keep watching. As I say, 3.63 thousand subscribers. We'd love to get that up to 5 by the end of this month. So, if you are subscribing, tell your friends about the channel, tell your friends about the channel, tell your friends' pets, whoever. I don't care. As long as they've got a YouTube account, or as long as they have access to the internet, I would love their support, because it means so much to me. It really keeps me going. And yeah, all you guys in the comment section being so nice with the feedback, it just keeps me going and keeps me feeling good. So yeah, definitely going to try and keep doing it for all of you. Thank you, as always, again, for liking, subscribing, all these kind of things on the videos and your comments. And I'm going to, this time, get to a few of the comments a little bit later in the show. So as always, if you have anything to say on the topics that we discuss along the show, please do get involved in the comment section. Let me know what you're thinking on everything I'm discussing. And a little plug for my other socials, as I always like to do at the start of these things. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it's at Kaya Kaynak 97. Most of my immediate breaking news sort of comes out there, and had quite a few this week. Been quite a busy week. And Facebook is Kaya Kaynak Journalist. I try and put stuff up there as quickly as I can as well. Instagram is Kaya Kaynak FL, and so is Threads. So let's get on with what's been going on with Arsenal this week. And I think I spoke about it on Monday, but the big story around Arsenal still is Jurrien Timber. It's quite sad that the news has been confirmed that he has an ACL. And as I reported to you guys on Monday, Arsenal were sort of wanting to hold back in terms of making official confirmation, and they'd sent him for scans on Monday. And yeah, I wrote a piece on this after the press conference on Thursday. So I'll put a link to that in the description of the show, a description of the video. But basically, to give you a brief summary of what it says, and it goes into much more detail in the report, Timber obviously got that injury. The injury happened in the first half. It's just before he goes into the collision with Brennan Johnson. So those of you who've been studying the video of all that stuff will know it well. It's sort of that first half thing, and he does the assessments on the pitch, and it looks pretty positive. There's not too much swelling. It looks kind of fine. He's able to walk around pain-free. He comes through the assessments, and the decision's taken for him to go back out for the second half. And then almost instantly in the second half, I think he lasts about 3-4 minutes, and the knee buckles again, and he has to come off. And sadly, that is an ACL injury. Arsenal were hopeful that it might not be too bad. And you may have noticed Timber himself seemed to think it wasn't too bad. Obviously posted his Instagram, I think, and his Twitter as well, said back soon. And I think when we all saw that, we thought, oh, that's good news. But obviously, as sniffing around it over the days after and sort of trying to speak to people close to Jurrien and close to the club, you start to hear sort of bad stories. And although he was walking around pain-free for a couple of days afterwards, relatively pain-free, he came in for assessment. They went through the MRI. They did all that kind of stuff, the scanning and all that kind of stuff. And sadly, it's come back with an ACL, which is a really, really sad bit of news from an Arsenal perspective. But I think they did the right stuff in terms of making sure that the sort of information was bang on before confirming it. It's interesting, and Arteta referenced this in his press conference, the number of ACLs that are happening across world football. So Courtois has done his ACL, Militao as well at Real Madrid, and 2 Aston Villa players, Emi Buendia and Tyrone Mings. And it's a real problem across the world football, if you like, or the footballing world. And obviously, Jurrien Timber was a player who played in the World Cup, joined up with Arsenal relatively early in pre-season, played to the end of the season with Ajax, and he's been quite busy. And he's someone who maybe he's never had injury problems in his career, but maybe this whole sort of, I guess, this influx of an increased amount of football is taking its toll. I wonder if across the course of the season we'll start to see more of these types of injuries. Hopefully not to any more Arsenal players, but I think they're going to become more and more common, which is a sad thing to say, but I think we're going to start to see them more and more, and it's a real shame. But as far as what it means for Jurrien Timber, Arteta did seem to hint that he's going to be out for the remainder of the season, which after one game in August is just so gut-wrenchingly cruel. So many of you in the comment section were sort of using it as a bit of a therapy room to just say, look, this is awful. I feel so bad for Jurrien, so sad. And it is really sad. It's a real shame that this has happened because he was looking so good in pre-season. He was making a real impact. He was settling in positively. He was well liked in the squad. He's well respected. And obviously with Zinchenko being out injured, he was making up for that role and doing really well. And that athleticism, that aggression in the tackle, all those kind of things. And it's interesting. I didn't unfortunately get the chance to ask Mikel Arteta a question at the press conference this week. But what I would have asked him is, do you think you're sort of back to square one now? Because obviously Jurrien Timber was brought in with the long-term plan of potentially avoiding squad depth issues. So Arsenal at the end of last season, and lots of people within the club, including Mikel Arteta, think that the season sort of fell apart because they didn't quite have the numbers in the business end of the season. And you talk to sources in the club and that's what they tell you. And Timber was signed to help avoid that. And suddenly Arsenal are back in the position where they were last season in terms of defensive additions. Yes, Thomas Partey can play right back. Yes, Declan Rice can play centre back. But you're now in a position where if one of Takahiro Tomiyasu or Alex Zinchenko or whoever, all of them have been pretty injury prone throughout their Arsenal career. I'd throw Kieran Tierney into that mix as well. If one of them picks up an injury, suddenly you're looking at the sort of the very thin squad, given that you're going to be playing Wednesday, Saturday, Champions League. And I don't know if Zinchenko's body can take that in terms of, I mean, listen, I'd love to be proved wrong by him, but I don't know if his body can take a game every 3 days for a whole season. I don't know if he can be relied upon in that sense. I don't know if Tomiyasu can be relied upon as it stands in that sense either. Both will want to prove their fitness and get fitter, but I think there's going to have to be a lot of heavy rotation. And Timber was the kind of guy who never had an injury problem in his career, was signed with that in mind as well. That was one of the factors contributing to an addition for him. And obviously Arsenal do all the sort of medical scouting reports and they look into all that kind of stuff before they make such a big commitment, because it's 40 million euros. It wasn't, I mean, you know, by modern day standards, a bargain, but it was still a relatively hefty fee. And yeah, sadly, Jurrien looks like he's going to be out possibly for the season. I mean, the hope will be that he can be back before the end. I've seen sort of various injury sort of experts, if you like, talking about those kind of things and saying maybe it's something where he can be back within 6 months. Arsenal aren't sure. He obviously had his surgery this week, and I'm sure we'll see a post from him at some point. I haven't been keeping an eye on his Instagram, but he'll have his, if he's not had it already, I think he has, but he'll be having a surgery. And then you can start to look at probably timescales and you can see the extent of the injury. What I've been told is that the injury is just the ligament itself, just the ACL. So you compare that to Tyrone Mings' injury, for example, where Mings is crying on the stretcher off the pitch. The reason that is so much more pain is because all the joints around it, if you like, have suffered problems too. Whereas with Jurrien, it's just the ACL. Having said that, it's obviously a massively crucial ligament in the knee, and it's a kind of thing where you don't recover from that quickly. It's definitely months, and as we said, Arteta seems to have hinted it's going to be the whole season. So a massive blow for Arsenal. Yeah, obviously somewhere to start, not the most positive of places to start. But sadly, they're going to lose a really talented player, possibly for the remainder of the season. But on slightly more positive news, because I want to talk a bit of positivity on this video, because I just don't want to be down the whole time. The under-21s played on Friday night, played last night, as it was. And this guy, Ethan Nwaneri, got a hat-trick. So that is positive stuff. Ethan Nwaneri is a really interesting one to keep an eye on this season. The plan is not, as far as I'm aware, currently to send him on loan. They want to keep him at Arsenal. They were very clear when they convinced him to stay, because there was a lot of clubs interested, including Manchester City, Chelsea, Liverpool. All those kind of guys were very interested in him. But Nwaneri's camp have sort of very clearly briefed that he always wanted to stay at Arsenal. One of the reasons he was convinced to stay at Arsenal, being an Islington boy, a local boy, obviously was a big part of it. But another reason was that he was shown a clear pathway into the first team. And Arsenal now, last season, he spent most of his time sort of going up and down between the 18s, where he did really well and helped Arsenal reach the FA Youth Cup final, and going up to the 21s, where he obviously did pretty decent as well. And I remember I was at the game and I broke the story when he was 15 years old, and he was making, I think he was starting for the 21s, and I want to say it was against Blackburn, and he looked so good. And I remember thinking, wow, this guy's something else. I was very impressed by him when I saw him in person. I've kept tabs on him ever since, and I've seen a few times with the youth team, and he's looked great. Obviously, we all saw him in that game against Brentford where he set the Premier League record. Came on for a couple of minutes. Came on in Nuremberg in pre-season, looked pretty good there. Was quite heavily involved in the games in Dubai as well in the winter break, and sort of made his Emirates Stadium debut in that friendly Arsenal had against Juventus before the World Cup, where they lost 2-0. But Ethan came on and looked pretty good, and he seems to be sort of continuing that upwards ascent. And I think Arsenal are probably managing it quite cleverly in the sense that maybe some of the hype that was on him when he first came into the first team has died down a touch now. I think obviously people got very excited when they saw him in Nuremberg, but Arsenal are quite keen to protect him and not overexpose him, if you like. And if you look at those midfield positions, where personally I think his best position is, I know he can play on the wings, he can play up front, but I think sort of one of those eights is potentially where he's probably going to end up. I think there could be a bit of scope for him coming in. I don't think, for example, there's areas where some players could leave in the future, and like we say, Nwaneri's only 16, but he's definitely one to keep an eye on. I think done really well, and he did well in front of Mikel Arteta. He was watching at the 21s game last night in attendance. Very impressed with how he got on. But another player I think he was there to watch. It was interesting because Arteta generally in the past has tended to go to those games when first team players have been involved, but obviously there was no first team players there. I do know that there's been a few sort of I guess people in and around some of the players in the 21s who have thought, Mikel, maybe you can come along to a few more of these games and I guess show the youngsters that you're keeping an eye on them. And he came to this one. He came to the one last night where they played Leicester. And I think maybe another player we would keep an eye on is Reuell Walters. Now, Reuell Walters has been in and around the Arsenal first team for a while now. Arteta is a big fan. He's not, as far as I'm aware, going to be going on loan as it stands, but that may change in the coming weeks. We never know because activity in the transfer market can change things. But I just wonder with this Jurrien Timber injury if that maybe opens a pathway for Reuell Walters, because Arteta would have been there watching, and yes, he would have been watching Ethan Nwaneri, and yes, he would have been watching, I think Miles Lewis-Skelly played last night. Obviously, two very talented youngsters who went away with Arsenal, and Kaya Kaynak as well. All three of them went away with Arsenal at points in pre-season. Kaya Kaynak to America, Nwaneri and Lewis-Skelly in Germany. But Nuremberg also played host to Reuell Walters, and Walters was the only sort of 21s player, if you like, to go on the tour of America last year. And he impressed there. And he's someone a bit like Jurrien Timber who can play anywhere across the back line. He's quite confident. He's a good dribbler. He's a good passer. He's very strong. He's only 18. But he's looking like someone who I think is doing really well in the 21s, and obviously was a big part of the under-18 side last year under Jack Wilshere that reached the FA Youth Cup final. And he loves playing from centre. If he's playing in centre-back, he loves to dribble out from the back, and he's created goals from that in the past for Arsenal's youth teams. And I just think he could be one to keep an eye on. I think Mikel Arteta would have been watching him there last night. I think that would have been one of the reasons that he would have gone to the 21s game, because, not necessarily always a game that he goes to. And he would have been watching Reuell Walters and thinking, I wonder if this guy can step up and maybe play some of those minutes. And I spoke a bit earlier with Timber, potentially Timber being out. I wonder if maybe Arteta thinks, we've given Timber a 5-year contract. I don't particularly want to go out and sign another player on a 5-year deal if you can avoid it. So why not turn to the academy where you've got some very talented players, Reuell Walters chief among them. Lino Souza is a good player as well in that defensive position. But I just think with Walters, he can play anywhere across the back line, just like Timber could. It'd be a lot to ask him to come in and start Premier League games, don't get me wrong. And if he did play important Premier League games, I think Arsenal would be in the midst of an injury crisis, and that obviously would be a concern. But I think he's just one to keep an eye on for minutes this season. I think he may be in and around it. And I wonder if Arsenal's transfer business in the last couple of weeks of this window will be affected by, they'll be thinking, you know what, Reuell Walters is a very talented youngster. Let's keep an eye on him. let's see what he can do with the 21s. And Arteta clearly is watching him very closely. He had another good game last night. I know they didn't keep a clean sheet, but I think by all accounts, he defended pretty well. Art de Rocher was there, so go read his piece on the 21s game in the Athletic. But obviously, I think Reuell Walters is one to keep an eye on. I really think he's someone who could make an impact on the first team this season. So that would be my hot tip from the youth team. And again, with these videos, I'm going to try and bring you a lot more coverage of the youth team because I tend to do some of those games as well. So I want to bring you as much as I can when it comes to the academy football because there's a lot of it and a lot of talented youngsters coming through this Arsenal side. Now, away from the under-21s, obviously the first team are playing on Monday. It's Crystal Palace for Arsenal. And it's the first chance we'll get to see this battle commence between Aaron Ramsdale and David Raya. Now, Raya's obviously coming on loan from Brentford. That was announced last week. He has signed for the season for a £3 million loan fee, and then Arsenal have the option, not obligation, option to make that deal permanent for £27 million next summer if they should see fit. Now, obviously, all the indications are that that deal will be made permanent. All the indications are from Brentford, at least, that they're not expecting David Raya back, but he has extended his contract there just for the case of value protection on their part. But I don't think he's going to be going back to Brentford. I think he's an Arsenal player for the foreseeable. And I just wanted to point you in the direction, actually, before I go into the battle between these two, of a piece I've done today that's gone out on Football London, which I'm quite proud of. It's an interview with Stephen Drench, who was David Raya's first academy coach at Blackburn, and the guy who spotted him basically and brought him over from Spain, where he's playing for UE Cornellà, a third-tier team in sort of Catalonia, around third-tier Spanish team. And they had a deal with Blackburn, and Raya came over, and it took him one session to convince Stephen Drench that he needed to come to Blackburn. And from that point on, it's quite an interesting piece, but I mean, if I may say so myself. And I'll definitely put a link to it in the description for you guys to go and read. So please do go and read it and share it with your friends and family if you like it. But or even people who aren't friends and family, whoever. But yeah, he talks about how he's become so good with his feet, how he was able to learn the language and coming in every day after games, asking for extra sort of feedback on his clips and never being satisfied and doing everything extra and imposing himself in terms of his personality immediately and how he won people over without even speaking a word of English in that first couple of games. And he's coming in and he's learned a couple of phrases in English and he's already charming all the locals, and how he got to be the level he is when it comes to playing from the back and the interesting sort of techniques and drills they used to do at Blackburn with him to try and improve that and try and work on his skills, and how he's maybe not your typical goalkeeper in the sense that he's only 6 foot. I mean, listen, I'm speaking as a 6'6" man, but 6 foot for a goalie is not particularly tall. People in this video may disagree. They may think that 6 foot is very tall, and I'm sure you'll get me in the comment section for saying that. But the reason he's able to continue to make these fantastic saves is some of the footwork and some of the extra legwork they did in the gym. And I thought it was interesting to hear Stephen talk about that in the interview. So please do go and give that a read. It's a piece I'm really, really proud of, and one that I really enjoyed doing. So I'll put like I say, a link to that in the description for this video, because I think it's a really nice piece. And the reason I've released it now is because obviously tomorrow is the Women's World Cup final, and I don't want to clash with that. And better luck to the Lionesses, by the way. Let me know your score predictions for the World Cup final tomorrow. I'm backing England to win against Spain. It won't be easy, but I think England will come out on top. But yeah, Monday night will be the first chance that we get to see this battle between Aaron Ramsdale and David Raya. Now, obviously, for this first game at Crystal Palace, I have to say I would be surprised if David Raya came straight into the side. It would feel a little bit of a kick in the teeth for Aaron Ramsdale, who's been pretty sublime for Arsenal over the past couple of years since he signed. Obviously, saved penalties in the Community Shield, saved one in the Emirates Cup as well this summer, so has been quite crucial in those games. And there he is celebrating a goal against Nottingham Forest, and that's the kind of stuff that we love from him, and that's the kind of stuff that has made him so popular so quickly. But it will be interesting to see how this battle plays out across the remainder of the season. Mikel Arteta, when he was asked about it in his press conference, he sort of deflected and went on the argument that, well, you've seen how Timber has got an ACL, that could happen to Ramsdale, then what happens? We're screwed. And while I buy that to an extent, I do think the goalkeeping position is unlike any other, where Arsenal will have various players who can cover Jurrien Timber's absence, whereas with the goalie, you can't really give them a few minutes here and there. You have to sort of throw them in cold. And you kind of have to commit to one. You can't really be playing both at the same time. And I just think that's going to be interesting to watch over the coming months. I think, like I say, Ramsdale will keep his place for the Palace game. But it'll be interesting to see that first battle. Obviously, David Raya played in the behind closed doors friendly against Luton that was on Thursday. Another piece I've got on Football London is sort of all the details from that game. And Reece Nelson came back as well. Trossard scored twice. Saka scored once. Luton aren't playing this weekend because they have to reschedule their game with Burnley because they can't play at Kenilworth Road yet because it's not Premier League ready. So it just made sense for Arsenal to play that game on Thursday, especially given that they were playing on Monday and some of the players who had been coming back from injury hadn't been fully fit and hadn't been able to play. So I might as well use this as a segue into the predicted lineup that I'm going for Arsenal versus Crystal Palace. And here we go. I am going for Aaron Ramsdale in goal. Left back, I've gone for Alex Zinchenko to return from the start. Now, an interesting one, Zinchenko. He's been in full training all week. He's back in that sense. He was in some full training last week, but it was just he wasn't quite ready to start. And they figured, we've got Timber. We don't need to rush Zinchenko back. And now Arsenal don't have Timber. And maybe they do need to rush Zinchenko back a little bit. And he played, I think, 60 minutes against Luton in that behind closed doors friendly. It was interesting. They played sort of 3/3 of 30 minutes rather than 2 45-minute halves, which is weird, but it's the way they did it. And so I think Alex will come back into the side. I don't know if he'll play the full 90 minutes. I wonder if we'll maybe see him start an hour or so and then Takehiro Tomiyasu come in for the remaining half an hour. But Mikel Arteta, when it comes to sort of giving players minutes and fitness, he generally, I think, likes to start them and get the minutes in the legs and see how they go, as opposed to bringing them off the bench where that maybe takes them a bit of time to get a feel for the game. So I would expect Alex Zinchenko to start at left back. Let me know if you disagree in the comments. And let me know your predicted lineups in the comments, by the way. Let me know what you're thinking for Crystal Palace. In defence, I've gone for Gabriel to return. So no longer Thomas Partey at right back. I think Arteta said it was for a specific game that he was expecting Forest to play, where they were defending behind the ball. I expect Palace to do a lot of defending as well, but I don't expect them to be as timid as Nottingham Forest were. I think Nottingham Forest were ridiculously defensive to an extent where they would just not really want to come out of their own half at all. I think Palace will look to counter and look to maybe play a bit more and cause us a few more problems a little bit higher up the pitch. And I just think in those kind of scenarios, Gabriel makes more sense to come back in. So I'd expect him to come back in alongside William Saliba. I think they're going to ditch that 3-6-1 thing, or maybe they'll do something similar. I don't know, with Zinchenko tucking in, but I just don't quite see it happening in the same way. So that means Ben White moves over to right back, William Saliba moves to right centre back, and Thomas Partey, in my opinion, will go back into the six with Declan Rice playing left 8, Martin Odegaard playing right 8. So no Kai Havertz in this team, you will notice. That is, in my opinion, not because I thought he was particularly bad against Nottingham Forest. I think people have gone a bit over the top in their criticism of Kai Havertz, actually. Sorry, I think people have gone way too far over the top in their criticism of Kai Havertz. I just think that it will take him a little bit of time to get used to it. He's spoken about this. He told me in Nuremberg, he said, I need a bit of time for my brain to adapt to this. Playing in midfield, he's played up front with Chelsea more or less 2.5 seasons now. And it takes a little bit of time to get back used to the positions where you're coming in back from deep and you're running. And it was interesting that he played quite well up front against Man City, where he worked really hard and was a good physical presence, and yes, didn't score the goals, but I thought had a really good game all round. And I think that's been over-exaggerated quite a lot because, Gabriel Jesus misses a lot of chances up front and no one seems to care. Suddenly when it's Kai Havertz, people seem to care. So I think there's a bit of a double standard going on there, personally. Let me know if you disagree in the comments. I mean, lots of people seem to think he's they're casting judgment on him quite early. I've seen a lot of people saying they've got an agenda against him. I don't like that. It's been literally 2 games. Give him a little bit more time. I think he'll become a good player for Arsenal. And even if he's not starting every single game, he just gives them a little bit more depth and a few more options. And this is what Arteta wants. This is the team I've gone for. But it's interesting now that I'm expecting you guys in the comments to have several different lineups. And there are several different lineups that Arsenal can play. They can play in so many different ways. And suddenly Arsenal have gone from being a team that's one of the most predictable in the Premier League last season to one where no one knows how they're going to play. I've got no idea how they're actually going to play in terms of the 11 they'll put out on the pitch. And that's exactly what Manchester City have been like over the past few years. And it's exactly what Arteta wants Arsenal to be like. So this is the team I've gone for. And I actually think on paper, it's probably Arsenal's strongest 11, obviously with Jesus maybe in Freddie and Nketiah. I think this is the strongest team in terms of the 11 that they had. I just like the balance between Partey and Rice. And Rice is a 6. I still have a few question marks over. So I like this. Martinelli's keeping his place over Trossard as Eddie, because I don't think after the way they played it against Forest, I don't think you can drop either. Same with Kaya Kaynak, obviously. He'll start regardless. Both Martinelli and Saka are interestingly nominated for PFA Young Player of the Year. So congratulations to them. No, you can't vote, but do go out and support them, I guess. A bit of a travesty that William Saliba wasn't involved in those nominations. I think he should have been. Maybe he was unfortunate in the sense that his injury came at just the time when they were talking about all that stuff. But yeah, definitely deserve to be in there. So yeah, I've gone for Eddie up top. I know lots of people will disagree with that. I've seen some people being in my comments very, let's say, unimpressed by Eddie. But I thought he played pretty well against Nottingham Forest. He got his goal, tends to score when he starts. I just think it makes sense. Trossard off the bench is certainly not a bad player. But let's be serious here. If something goes wrong with Eddie and he doesn't score and he doesn't play as well as he can do, Fulham next week, I'd expect Trossard to be back in the starting 11. So Eddie knows he's got competition for places, and that, again, is what Arteta wants. It's, again, what Arsenal want, and it's a really good sign for how things are developing in this Arsenal squad. Like I say, let me know your predicted lineups in the comments, and please do let me know what you're thinking about all the topics we're discussing across this video. And yeah, a few of your questions I wanted to get to. So, Guna Jake 4276 asked, "Hi Kaya, does Arteta have a plan for Saka for a competitive option? Saka surely can't be playing as many minutes as he did last season. And what happens if he sustains an injury for a while?" So, I see a lot of this, and the implication I think from Jake is, are Arsenal basically going to sign a Saka backup? Obviously, if you look at the squad prior to Timber's injury, that's probably the one place where you could say, yeah, there's scope for an addition there, I think, personally. So right now, I would be surprised if it happened. And the reason I'd be surprised if it happened is because there's lots of sales that still need to happen in those forward positions. So Nicola Pepe is still an Arsenal player. Flo Balogun is still an Arsenal player. All those kind of guys need to be dealt with. Obviously, Marquinhos is gone. If I may say so myself, a pretty cool story about Marquinhos this week, actually, and how his sort of transfer to Nantes was arranged to have a transfer room, which is an interesting sort of transfer social network thing. Again, I'll put a link to that in the description. Why not? Yeah, I'll let you have a read of that as well. But back to Gunnar Jake's question. So I think the plan, if you like, currently is Reece Nelson signed a contract extension over the summer, and Arsenal wanted to keep him for a reason. It's because they wanted to have forwards and players who could play across the forward line, and Reece can do that. Can't play up front, but can play on either wing, and that's very useful. Interestingly, though, most of his minutes have come on the left rather than the right. I would say Trossard can do the job, Kai Havertz can do the job, Fabio Vieira can do the job, Emil Smith-Rowe can do the job, Gabriel Martinelli, even Gabriel Jesus has played there in the past, Eddie's played there in the past. So there are options for Arsenal in terms of a backup to Bukayo Saka. None of them are quite, I guess, a replica of what Saka does, and none of them are quite ideal in terms of being able to not have to change the plans massively. And I see these links to Mohamed Kudus and Ansu Fati, and I get where people are coming from with them. Having said that, though, I'd be surprised if those happen right now at this stage in the window. I just think Arsenal have a lot of other stuff they need to focus on, and Arteta himself has said that they weren't planning on bringing anyone in prior to Jurrien Timber's injury. So I just don't think I can see it happening right now. I think the plan is for him to be backed up by all those guys I mentioned there. And Arteta has previously said if Saka wants to be one of the best in the world, he needs to play 70 games a season. And that is I think the reality and the challenge that Arteta has set for Bukayo Saka. And he's quite physically robust. He gets kicked to pieces every single game, but he's got strong ankles, strong legs. He's able to get back up. So, yeah, I think that's the plan, Gunnar Jake. So it's a risk, don't get me wrong. I think it is a risk, but Arsenal would be able to cope if Saka were to sustain an injury. But you could say this about any team. I mean, Man City have lost Kevin De Bruyne for months. How are they going to replicate him? It's not going to be easy. Big teams lose big players, and it's very difficult to find a backup. It's not quite sort of, if you're trying to pitch to another player to come in, let's say Mohamed Kudus, you're wanting to pitch to him and you say, do you want to come to Arsenal and play second fiddle to Bukayo Saka? Not as appealing as maybe if he wants to go to Brighton or West Ham and play every week and still be in Europe and then potentially make a move afterwards. So I think it's a tough sell. It's a tough player to find, and you have to find someone who's willing to maybe not play as many minutes and share the minutes and train well and all that kind of stuff. So interesting. And don't forget Mario Cozy-Dubry, Ethan Nwaneri, young players who can play in those roles as well. So I'd say that's the plan, if you like, for now. Another question. Oh, yeah. So I wanted to show this because I found it quite funny looking through the comments, sort of the three comments on Tierney. So one from Virpa Shawala 5734. It's almost karma for leaving Tierney out of the squad. This is relation to Timber's injury. Aaron Alexandra MC8NW. We should respect Tierney to let go. And then the treatment of Tierney is harsh, says Mohamed Zashan 2075. And I just feel like it's a good spectrum of the Tierney, I guess, debate, the viewpoint. Various people think that Kieran Tierney should be allowed to leave. Some people think he should be staying. Some people think he should be involved. Newcastle appear to have pivoted to Lewis Hall, so that would be, I suggest, unlikely right now, given that they'd have Lewis Hall, Dan Burn, Matt Targett. They'd have 3 players there who can all play left back, 3 homegrown players as well, and they're putting a lot of money into Lewis Hall. I believe it's going to be around 30 million initial loan as well, which is what Newcastle wanted to do with Kieran Tierney, and obviously that wasn't quite on the something that maybe Arsenal were as positive about. And Sociedad are another team who are interested, as I've reported on here before and reported on Football London. Again, they're a team who want to get him on loan. Listen, if Kieran Tierney was to leave on loan, it wouldn't be the end of the world. He's got 3 years left in his contract, and if he goes and plays somewhere and gets his value up, then I think that could be good for Arsenal. However, since the Jurrien Timber injury, I think if you're letting Kieran Tierney go, and this is just my opinion, if you're letting Kieran Tierney go, it has to be for a permanent money, and it has to be for quite a decent amount of money as well, just because you're hamstringing yourself to such an extent that you're low on numbers and you're essentially leaving yourself with 7 defenders because, let's say, Timber's out for the season, as Arteta has hinted. You've got Zinchenko, Tomiyasu, Gabriel, Kibior, Saliba, Holding, and Ben White. Have I forgotten anyone? I don't think I have. So that's 7 defenders right there. Is that enough to compete across the whole season? Obviously, Partey can play right back and Rice can play centre back. But if you're looking at those baseline 7 defenders, is that enough to compete across the whole season in the Champions League and the Premier League and the FA Cup and the Carabao Cup? I don't think so. So I think if you're letting Tierney go and you're reducing your numbers like that, it's got to be for some cash straight up now. It's got to be. And Arsenal, I don't think, are necessarily in a position where they have to sell this window. Obviously, they need to do sales and they want to get back to the self-sustaining model in the long run, but they're not in a position where they have to make sales to balance the books right now. I think, it's more likely that a big ticket sale would come from Flo Balogun, who hopefully I've got a slide on so we can talk about in a little bit, but I'll discuss him in a bit anyway. So, yeah, Tierney, I think, I don't know. In my opinion, I think I'd keep him, but only if a really good offer came in from somewhere for sort of straight up cash would I consider letting him go right now after the Timber injury. Before the Timber injury, maybe you can talk about a loan with a view to buy, but right now, I think Kieran has to stay at Arsenal. That is all the slides I've got, but obviously I wanted to talk a little bit as well to you guys about Flo Balogun's situation. So many teams interested in him. A lot of teams interested in him. I've reported that Monaco have had a bid rejected, and I've also reported that they're expected to come back with a second bid. They need a striker because Reuell Walters is out for the rest of the season. There's reports linking Balogun to Tottenham. I have to say I'd be surprised if Arsenal would accept that because you'd be strengthening a rival. I know Spurs aren't in the hunt for the title by any stretch of the imagination, but they are rivals. Chelsea reportedly interested as well. Haven't heard anything concrete on that myself, but a rival again, you're strengthening, and also Chelsea tax, like they're willing to pay £150 million on Moises Caicedo. If you're Arsenal, say, well, hang on, now we want 65 for Flo Balogun from you. We know you've got it, pay it. That's what I'd say if I was in the negotiations, because you don't want to sell to Chelsea. If you're going to sell to Chelsea, they have to give you a really, really tempting offer. And from Flo Balogun's perspective, I'm not sure Chelsea is the best club for him to go to. They've got Nicholas Jackson, they've got Armando Broja, they've got players who can play up front, and Lukaku's still technically a Chelsea player. So if he goes there, he's not guaranteed the game time that he wants. He'd essentially be in a similar position to where he is at Arsenal, where he's not playing week in, week out. Maybe you get more games, but he's not at a team in Europe. I just don't think it makes much sense. The link that I have heard a bit on, and I know sort of there is some interest there, is Fulham. Fulham have a little bit of interest in Flo Balogun, and it's interesting that that's come out just as the stories about Alexander Mitrovic leaving have started to sort of come forward. And Mitrovic apparently is going to go to Al Hilal in Saudi Arabia. I believe the fee being quoted is around £50 million. Now, you don't have to be a genius to think, well, who's a £50 million forward out in the market right now? Flo Balogun. And this is exactly what Arsenal wanted, in the sense that they wanted a bidding war to start for Flo Balogun. And I think that's probably why they turned down Monaco's initial bid, because they knew that lots of teams would be interested in a striker towards the end of the window. West Ham have reportedly been interested as well. lots of teams will be interested in a striker before the end of the window. It just makes sense. It makes sense for a player like him to drive up the bargain, drive up the price, get as many teams involved as you can, and try and see if you can get as much of a fee as possible. I don't think the £50 million fee that was being quoted at the start of the window is as concrete as people think. I don't think it's a case of if Arsenal don't get their £50 million, then they'll say, no, we're keeping him. I think there is room for negotiation there. But from an Arsenal perspective, let's say tomorrow, Fulham say we want him, West Ham say we want him, Chelsea, Tottenham also we want him, Monaco say we want him, Inter, I don't know if they can keep up with it financially. But those guys all going for the same player, all wanting the same guy, supply and demand, that means his price goes up. So from an Arsenal perspective, it's pretty good. The more interested in Flo Balogun, the better. I would be very surprised if he's involved in the squad on Monday against Crystal Palace. I don't expect him to be. He wasn't involved in that behind closed doors game against Luton either, so I don't think he'll be involved. I think his future is elsewhere. I've asked Arteta about this so many times, but he, as always with these transfers, is a little bit coy. So he's a little bit coy as well on potential exits involving the likes of Nicola Pepe and Nuno Tavares. Latest story on Nuno, as I reported again earlier this week, Nottingham Forest very interested, talks ongoing with Nottingham Forest about a potential move there. The reports I've seen for some very reliable journalists around £30 million. If Arsenal could get £30 million on Nuno Tavares, I think that'd be a great deal. His preference, as I've said all summer, is to stay in England. He had interest from Werder Bremen and Wolfsburg. Both of those were wanting to pay around the £50 million mark. And I just don't think Nuno was interested in going away from England. He wants to stay in the Premier League. He wants to stay with an English team. He's very happy here. So, it looks like that's sort of the area that they're talking about. Nuno Tavares to Nottingham Forest. Listen, Forest need a left-back. Their two left-backs, Harry Toffolo and Omar Richards, are both out injured. They had to play a right-back at left-back against Arsenal last week. They've already taken Matt Turner, so there's the relationship there. Those links do make a lot of sense. And as I say, the talks are ongoing, but we'll have to see what happens on that front. If Arsenal could get the reported £30 million fee, I think that'd be really, really, really good business this summer. But we'll have to see what happens on that front. So I'll start to wrap things up now. Another thing to reference, of course, is Reuell has gone to Cardiff. I reported that earlier in the week as well. Trying to think if there's anything I want to cover that I haven't covered still. No. If there is anything, let me know in the comments. I'll try and get back to more of your questions. My plan is to, on Tuesday, come to you guys with the video reacting to Crystal Palace. Obviously, Crystal Palace is on Monday. I'll try and do a few shorts for you guys in the ground. But like I say, my ability to do that has been somewhat limited on that front. So I will try as much as I can to bring you content. But you can see matchday content on my other social channels. So at Kaya Kaynak 97 is Twitter. Kaya Kaynak Journalist is Facebook. Kaya Kaynak FL for Instagram and Threads. Sorry if it sounds a bit rustly. Suddenly this wind has just come out of nowhere. My window's open because it's boiling hot today, and there's a massive gust of wind has just come into the tree outside my house. So that's making a lot of rustly noise. But hopefully you can hear me loud and clear. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. If you have enjoyed this video, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell whoever, tell your enemies. I don't care. I just want them to be involved in supporting. I'd love to hit 5,000 by the end of this month. Thank you so much, everyone, for your support. Thank you for getting involved. Thank you for getting involved in the comment section. Please do let me know what you think on these things, because it really does matter to me and it provides me with stuff to talk about. So I really appreciate it. I'll be back with you all very soon. The plan, as I say, is Tuesday, but keep an eye out on the channel for more content between now and then on Crystal Palace, and any updates I can give you, I will do so. Until then, thank you so much, everyone, for joining me. Thank you for watching this video. Again, I do really appreciate the support. Keep liking, keep subscribing, keep sharing, and I'll see you all very soon.